ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. കദന നിവാരണ കനിവിന്നുറവേ കാട്ടിൻ നടുവിൽ വഴി തെളിക്കൂ. ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. പരീക്ഷണത്തിൻ വാൾമുനയേറ്റി പടനിലത്തിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ വീഴുമ്പോൾ ഹൃദയക്ഷതിയായി രക്തം ചിന്തി ലോകപാലകാ ജഗദീശ താങ്ങായി തണലായി ദിവ്യോഷധിയായി താതാനാഥ കരം പിടിക്കൂ. ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. പുല്ലിൽ പൂവിൽ പുഴുവിൽ കിളിയിൽ വന്യജീവിയിൽ വനചരനിൽ ജീവബിന്ദുവിൻ അമൃതം തൂകിയ ലോകപാലകാ ജഗദീശ ആനന്ദത്തിൻ അരുണകിരണമായി അന്ധകാരമിതിൽ അവതരിക്കൂ. ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. കദന നിവാരണ കനിവിന്നുറവേ കാട്ടിൻ നടുവിൽ വഴി തെളിക്കൂ. ലോകം മുഴുവൻ സുഖം പകരാനായി സ്നേഹദീപമേ മിഴി തുറക്കൂ. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Alina. Such beautifully rendered. I was watching you also on the Flower Sing USA this season one. You sang it very well. Thank you. So next up, I'd like to invite our chairman, Hari Nambudri, to offer a few words of felicitation.
Before I speak, I request our chairman, Dr. A.V. Anu, to do the introductory remarks, please.
നമസ്കാരം. ഇതിൽ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് സ്പീക്കിംഗ് ആരെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടോ? മലയാളികൾ അല്ലാത്തവരുണ്ടോ?
മലയാളവും ഇംഗ്ലീഷും മിക്സ് ചെയ്ത് സംസാരിക്കാം.
അല്ലല്ല, നോൺ മലയാളീസ് അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടോ എന്ന് ചോദിക്കാൻ. ഉണ്ടോ?
No.
Okay, അപ്പൊ പിന്നെ മലയാളം മതിയല്ലോ.
We have non-Malayalis also. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Hari, for giving this opportunity, and also Biju. I'm glad that the America region is continuously organizing various quality programs though through online, and I must congratulate the health wing of America region for taking up this good initiative. This is a very relevant subject. Yes, already we had a program like this, but still there are a lot of concerns about taking vaccine. Even in India, I find very senior doctors are reluctant to take vaccine. Anyway, I am planning to take vaccine tomorrow. I already made the arrangements. If everything is through, I'll be able to take it tomorrow. And I find that there are different kind of questions people are asking. Even today, even in my family, all are asking, many of them have food allergy and things like that, whether food allergy people can take vaccine. So even when I ask the local doctors, they are not able to give us a proper answer. So hope today we'll get a proper reply for all these doubts. And the last time also, most of the questions were clarified, but still I find that the phase in which it is going is very slow. Even in India also, I find there is absolutely no rush. When I inquired about taking vaccine tomorrow in Chennai Medical College, they said absolutely no rush here. You can anytime come register and get it done. So that is a situation here. Anyway, I'm glad that many eminent, knowledgeable doctors and scientists are taking part here. I wish the function all the best, and I wish the speakers also, as global chairman of World Malayali Council, our thanks and all the very best for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anu, for your kind words of felicitation. Next, I would like to invite the Global President, Johnny Kuruvilla to offer a short felicitation.
Hi, good morning, America. Good evening, India and the rest of the world. America Region Health Forum is conducting this year's first ever Health Forum meeting. I'm very glad to be part of it, and I hope it's going to be very informative, and it will eliminate many people who doubts, including my son. He doubts that the vaccination, there will be a lot of side effects. And when I ask him, what are the side effects, he is not aware of it. He's just repeating people what people are thinking about. Possibly there will be some sort of side effects. He is listening to me anyway. So, right. So when I ask him why, he have no answer. What are the side effects? I don't even know. But I'm very positive. Hope there will be an end for this epidemic forever, and we will come back to life back to normal life after few days or 1 or 2 months. I congratulate one and all from America region, that also the new team who took over the air in America. I appreciate those experts participating today who are well known in America as per our American regional president Thangamani has mentioned to me today early morning. Now, let us start. Let's go for it. Let's listen. All the very best. May God bless this session. Thank you.
Before I go further, I would like to make a comment. My name is S.K. Cherian, VP of America region. I took both the shots. Yesterday, I took second shot. There is no problem, no complication. I'm sitting and attending the meeting. Please be brave and go and take it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Johnny Chattai, for your kind words of felicitation. Next up, I invite Hari Nambudiri, American Region Chairman, to offer the kind felicitation.
Good evening, India. Good morning, United States of America. It is indeed my distinct pleasure to be a part of World Malayali Council, Global and America in particular. This is one of our humble endeavors to help to communicate, to establish the conceptual clarity on vaccine. Why, and why. We have eminent speakers today. I respect, and I request everyone to mute their phone during the presentation. There are a lot of people watching on YouTube. Also, people join, about 70 people join on this webinar. Thank you, the global leaders, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, Mr. VP Admin, for joining us today. Our goal is to make sure that we can find the right answers for the vaccine, and that is the topic today. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Sunil Kumar and Dr. Shyam Sundar Kotilal in several occasions. I think I was lucky to have a discussion, a dialogue with Dr. Shyam Sundar Kotilal, and I believe that he's the first Indian virologist of University of Maryland. Thank you, doctors, for joining today. And let us hear from the experts. And this should be, and this will be, an interactive session to understand, to assimilate, and collaborate on the topic of vaccine. I congratulate Ms. Lata Joseph for taking the lead of the Health Forum. Within a week's time, she put it together to make this happen. Also, I appreciate our President, Madam Thangam Aravind, for taking the lead and making this happen, as well as the General Secretary, Viju Chako, and Treasurer Thomas Chellit, and Mr. Jacob Kodashnad, our VP Admin. Thank you again. Let us hear, let us listen, let us have the most productive session of the World Malaria Council. Thank you. God bless America. God bless India. God bless World Malaria Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Hari. Last but not the least, I invite our president, Thangam Aravind, to offer her kind of felicitation. And right after that, we'll enter the question and answer session, and we'll hear from the doctor panels. Thangam Aravind, over to you.
Thank you, Biju. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of World Malayali Council America region, I welcome each one of you for today's COVID vaccine seminar organized by America Region Health Forum. Warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Dr. Sunil Kumar, who is a medical provider at the forefront of COVID-19 management in Florida. And Dr. Shyam Sundaran is a virologist who was trained by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who leads the COVID fight for the country of America. It was our pleasure to have you both with us today in your weekend schedule, sir. Thank you. Welcome, Global Chairman Dr. A.V. Anup, President Mr. Joni Kurvilla, all WMC Global Regional Provincial leaders for your participation today to grace the occasion today. Appreciate Lata Joseph, the Health Forum Chair, for taking initiative in conducting very useful program for the community, and the entire AR executive for your contributions to make it success today. Today is our opportunity to learn from the experts, and hope we all will take advantage of educating yourself and your family and your friends as well. Thank you. Sit back and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Thangam. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this event. It's none other than our Health Forum newly acquired, Dr. Lata Joseph of the WMC Health Forum. She's a nurse practitioner by profession and working at Durham VA Healthcare System. She's a faculty at the Duke University School of Nursing and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She serves as a resource for the Gerontological Nurses Association of the India's Healthy Aging Project, which is supported by the National Institute of Social Defense, Delhi. So here, over to you, Dr. Lata. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, greeting of the day. I'm glad to be with you for this noble effort. And before I introduce the first speaker for today, I'd like to show you a small clip where you will know who this first speaker is.
That has been working tirelessly on the front line he is going to get this vaccination first for Broward Health Medical Center today.
This has been a dark phase of our lives, and with this vaccine, I think it's a light at the end of the tunnel finally. And for me, that light is a little more closer today. So I'm extremely happy.
So I think it's
So that is Dr. Sunil Kumar, our first speaker for today. So Dr. Kumar is a graduate of Thiruvananthapuram Medical College in Kerala, India, and he did his internal medicine residency at Long Island College Hospital, the New York, Brooklyn, and he did a critical care fellowship at Brown University School of Medicine in Rhode Island, and another pulmonary medicine fellowship at the University of Miami School of Medicine in Florida. Dr. Sunil has published several papers in pulmonary medicine, which are highly cited and referenced in that specialty. Currently, Dr. Sunil Kumar is the medical director of the Intensive Care Unit and Chief of Staff of Broward Health Medical Center, Miami, Florida. As a leader in this facility's pandemic management, Dr. Kumar was highly acclaimed by the governor of Florida, and he was interviewed by the media several times. And Dr. Sunil is an advocate for the right approach to the pandemic management and really vocal about it. And we have just seen his excitement when he received the vaccine. Additionally, Dr. Sunil is the affiliate dean and assistant professor of medicine at the Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine at Florida International University. Dr. Kumar also serves on the governing board of American Lung Association, and he's a fellow of the American College of Physicians. Dr. Sunil Kumar is the past president of AKMG, the Association of Kerala Medical Graduates of North America, and the current chair for its humanitarian services. Dr. Sunil received so many accolades in the past and especially in 2020. So he received the 2020 Excellence in Healthcare Award from the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce, and also the Indo-American Plus Club 2020 International Excellence Award for Humanitarian Efforts. So Dr. Kumar is a resource person, a patient advocate, and it is my pleasure to collaborate with Dr. Kumar on this platform. And I hope Dr. Kumar is going to give his few minutes of the day for World Malayali Council in the future as well, when I approach him for some professional support. So this is to you now, Dr. Kumar, please take over.
Can you hear me? Thank you, World Malayali Council. Good morning, everybody. Good evening to people from India and other parts of the world. Thank you for inviting me to this talk today. I am so delighted to share the podium with a wonderful Shyam, Dr. Shyam, and excited to be with you all. Thank you for that introduction, Lata, and thank you for inviting me. I think Lata and I participated in a couple of talks before for NANA, and like Hari Namudri said, we had interactions with several other functions as well. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Tell me if you all can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you again. So again, my name is Sunil Kumar, and I'm one of the intensivists who's been working in the front lines of this unfortunate pandemic from the beginning of last year. Luckily, that year is over, and we see a light at the end of the tunnel. So before we start talking about vaccines, we need to know some of the basics, and we need to understand how the body works and the antibiotics works. And that way we can convince pretty much 100% of everybody to get this vaccine, because that is the best option we have at this point. So to understand that, I'm going to go through some of the basics. I understand that the participants are mostly non-medical, but there are some medical people in this audience, so that could be a little boring for them, but bear with me when we go through this. As Biju mentioned in the beginning, this is a virus that's, we're not able to see with our naked eye, but just so that we understand how some of the functions of this virus or how that attacks our human body, you have a picture that you see that's published initially by CDC. And just so that we understand, there are several proteins on this virus. But the most important protein that we're going to talk about and we're going to discuss is what we call the spike protein. It has several functions, but the most important function of this spike protein is to attach to a human cell, and from cell to cell, it attaches. So it has got a major role in transmission. So I'm going to discuss some of those things. I'm also going to discuss how treatments work, how antibodies work, and talk a little bit about the different variants, and then we can get to the vaccine talk by Dr. Shan. So the transmission of this virus is extremely important when we are talking about the entire pandemic, as well as when we are discussing about the vaccines. This virus is a denser particle, so majority of the transmission is through what we call contact droplets. That means since a virus is dense, it cannot really fly too far. So usually it's about 1 meter or 6 feet distance. When you cough, you sneeze, this virus can spread to other human beings. So from the infected host, it's mostly by contact droplets, but there are some studies that showed there is some minimal airborne. That means smaller particles are produced by all the procedures that we do or the treatments we give, and that can also potentially transmit, but majority of the transfer or transmission is by contact droplets. So again, like I mentioned, coughing, sneezing, singing, talking loud, breathing soda, those are the different ways that you transmit this virus. Once you have symptoms, you can transmit this virus up to 9 days, and it's rarely cultured in respiratory samples after about 9 days. Till now, there is very little data to suggest that there is vertical transmission. That means if a pregnant woman is infected, the baby is mostly safe, and there is very little information to suggest otherwise. So what about timing of transmission? Most of the transmission occurs just before your symptoms develop or within 5 days of symptom onset. That is the highest infectivity period that we call. Pre-symptomatic infections or transmission is very low. And we all know asymptomatic transmission, especially children, because they don't really develop many symptoms. So why is this? Why are we talking about transmission even after a year into this pandemic? Well, to be honest with you, after fighting this pandemic or the virus for almost a year, this is the singular most important thing that we can use to prevent and stop this virus from spreading. Hands down, no questions, no doubts about it. Surgical mask definitely helps. If you have an N95, definitely superior to a surgical mask. So there's so much discussion. This even became so political. I don't want to get into those policy decisions or discussions, but clearly there is no doubt this is a singular best weapon that we have against this virus. So how do we prevent those? What are those preventive interventions? You already know all these things, but I want to stress this again because these things are extremely important. So if you suspect somebody is sick, we need to isolate that person, quarantine the close contacts. That means people who came in contact a couple of days before that patient got symptomatic. Of course, washing our hands, maintaining that social distancing of physical distance of 6 feet, especially inside a room, and wearing a mask. Practicing all those good behaviors definitely helps. So what are the primary symptoms? Most of you already know these symptoms. Majority of the patients have very mild symptoms, just like a regular cold. But some patients develop just severe headache and no other symptoms. But the serious symptoms are the respiratory symptoms, so shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. Some people develop nausea, vomiting. So these symptoms may start around 2 days after exposure and can last up to 2 weeks of exposure. Again, these symptoms vary between children, men, women, there is a variation. So most of the children, they have upper respiratory symptoms. That means ear, nose, and throat symptoms, just like a regular cold. And fatigue and fever and loss of appetite are more in adult patients. And for whatever reason, the exact etiology is not clear, but loss of smell, headaches are more common in women. But fever and cough are more common in men. Obviously, symptom to death in some population is much faster, especially if you're older and if you have any other diseases that could contribute to getting severe illness. For example, if you're overweight or obese, if you have diabetes, hypertension, all these things can make the disease much more severe. There are a lot of other non-pulmonary symptoms that we get. I won't go through the entire list. Forming blood clots is very common in this disease. Like I said, neurologic symptoms like headaches and strokes are not uncommon, and many other symptoms. So how do we define what severity means? So you define basically based on your symptoms. So if you're short of breath and you have cold symptoms, that's a mild disease. And once you get to moderate to severe disease, most of the people are very short of breath, severe coughing, and subsequently they start dropping their oxygen level. That is a time that you need to present yourself to the closest emergency room to further investigate the symptoms that you're having. Hopefully, and luckily, majority of the people recover from the mild to moderate symptoms, and very few patients end up in my ICU. And unfortunately, once you end up with severe illness or critical illness, there are very few treatments that are available. So let's talk about treatments. And before we talk about treatments, I just want to briefly explain there are 3 different stages of this disease. So in the early stages where the virus is still trying to multiply and take over our body's immune response. But of course, our body's immune response is going to fight back. So you go from that viral response phase into the phase where the body is trying to fight that virus, and then eventually that immune response itself is going to fight the cells of our body. And this is what we call, or you've probably heard this term, cytokine storm. That whole thing happens in this area. So the treatment is different in each stage. So if it is an early stage, you really don't need medications. It's all supportive care. If it is in the middle part, that's where the medication use starts. And also we start using oxygen. So I mentioned earlier, forming blood clots are very common. This has been studied many, many times. But unfortunately, from the data that we have available for this whole pandemic, it's all retrospective analysis. And that includes even in majority of the treatments that we use for COVID-19, except remdesivir. So we use blood thinner. Probably know heparin or Lovenox, and those are the blood thinners that we use. That study is also very controversial. Some studies showed, other than prophylaxis, if you give therapeutic, that means treatment dose of heparin or Lovenox, it's probably not that beneficial. But I completely disagree with this because this is what we are seeing in our ICUs. What changed the trajectory of this disease is use of steroids and use of blood thinners. So obviously this study contradicts the previous one. So what does our authorities say? So NIH says currently insufficient data to recommend for or against the use of thrombolytics, that's a blood busting medication, or increasing anticoagulant dose. ASH also discourages using it, but they're not recommending for or otherwise. So what are the other treatments that are available and what really works? There are many antiviral therapy that are medications that are used to prevent the virus from multiplication or kills the virus. And then there are immunomodulators that changes the immunity of producing antibodies in our body. So the first trial of using steroids came from the famous recovery trial from the UK. So till this study came out, the recommendation from WHO was not to use steroids. And we did follow that probably a month or maybe 6 weeks and realized that the recommendations are not really working. And then we had to come up with our own recommendations and we started using steroids in our hospitals and many centers across the country. But then clearly the recovery trial showed that using steroid will help. And again, I explained that third phase where that entire inflammatory process is happening in our body, which destroys our cells, is where the use of steroid really comes into play. So NIH and IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, also came up with recommendations for using steroids, but the recommendations are very clear. You use it when you are requiring oxygen in a hospital or at home. If you use steroids, if you don't require oxygen, the benefit is probably not there. And a sub-analysis even showed it could probably harm you if you use steroids without oxygen requirement. The only drug that's been approved by FDA for use in COVID-19 is remdesivir. Why do I say the only drug? Again, like I mentioned, most of the data that we have is from retrospective analysis in majority of the case. So these are not case-controlled, randomized controlled trials, except in remdesivir. The ACT-1 trial came out showing there is benefit in using remdesivir. It decreases the length of stay in the hospital. It decreases mortality. But the approval is only for patients 12 years or older and weighing at least 40 kilos and above. That's the only place that FDA really approved the drug for use. Again, in pediatrics, they came out, they saw some benefit, but not with randomized controlled trials. So that came out as an EUA, or otherwise called emergency use authorization. So that's a decision that has to be made with the discussion between the patient and the physician to discuss about the risk and the benefits, and then we use the drug. Another modality that got a lot of popularity in the early stages of COVID-19 was using convalescent plasma. So what is convalescent plasma? So when you get infected, your body produces antibodies. Whether your body produces antibodies by getting an infection or getting a vaccine, the antibodies are the same. So what if we take antibodies from a patient who recovered from the disease and give it to a patient? Is it beneficial? Theoretically, yes, because the antibody will work against the virus and kills the virus and prevents the virus from multiplication. So we started using plasma early in the disease process of the pandemic. Most of the data were published from China and outside the United States, but then Mayo Clinic started an open label protocol. They basically collected data from multiple centers across the country, started from April through July, and they collected data on 35,000 patients. That's a big number. So what did they show? One, they showed that using plasma from an infected or recovered patient is safe in hospitalized patient, and also suggested if you use plasma early, it could potentially reduce mortality. But there are several factors in that. The transfusion has to be done within 3 days, and the plasma should have a high enough titer or a high enough quantity of antibodies in the blood. And that is how it's been approved, and it's still under an EUA because we still don't have a randomized control study. So we're still using it. It's still under EUA. So everybody needs to understand that difference. So according to NIH, there are insufficient data to recommend either for or against the use of convalescent plasma for the treatment of COVID-19. We use it. We used it carefully, looking at the patient status and how early they came to the hospital, and all those things are extremely important. What about monoclonal antibodies? So this is a genetically engineered antibody that created by cloning white cells from humans. And this antibody, we started, the Eli Lilly and Regeneron, those are the two companies that came out with the monoclonal antibodies. They work, but if you look at the data, it works in the very early stages of the disease, and it works in mild disease. So the recommendation is if anybody develops symptoms, and within the 10 days of symptoms, you need to take this drug. It is mostly well tolerated, but you have to be above a certain age to get this medication. So the recommendations are if you're 65 and above, or you have a BMI, that means you're on the heavier side, you have a higher risk, and you could get this drug within those 10 days of symptoms. Otherwise, if you're above 55 with all these other symptoms, a heart disease, lung disease, you could meet criteria for receiving this drug. The second monoclonal antibody is Regeneron. This is what President Trump received in the early stages. Again, these are only approved for outpatient use. If you're admitted to a hospital, these drugs don't have much benefit, and it is not approved to be used. So why am I talking about all these antibodies? Because this is exactly the science that Dr. Sharma is going to discuss about how vaccines will produce antibodies, how it protects us from getting really sick. Now, I'm going to move on to the next favorite topic. We cannot watch TV without hearing the word mutation or variant. So let me briefly explain what that means. So every cell has a potential in our body to mutate. Every other organism has a potential for their cells to mutate. So mutation means the genetic language in their body, including the virus, changes, or when they are multiplying, there is a misprint in that coding. And so that produces multiple mutations. Now, mutation is not the same as a variant. We already heard about multiple variants, the UK variant, the South African variant, but each of those variant also has multiple mutations. Now, mutations are important to know. Most of the mutations do nothing at all, but some of the mutations can make changes. So I'm going to briefly go over those variants. The famous one is UK variant, which we call B117. It became very famous during the Christmas time when Boris Johnson from UK shut down the whole country, and this started in Kent. That's a southern part of United Kingdom. It has, like I said, about 22 different mutations, and the mutation is happening at the spike protein. If you remember the picture that I showed at the beginning, that red spot, it's like a handle that the virus uses to attach to a cell. So these mutations are happening at the spike protein. So what does that mean? These mutations are making the virus more sticky. So that means it is able to stick to a cell and transmit to the next cell, and it also makes it more contagious. Can it make it more virulent, or can it increase mortality? That question is still not answered clearly, but we know for a fact if it is more contagious, obviously it can spread to a lot more number. And when the number goes up, the number of deaths also can go up. The other way, well, this is an example of how fast it spreads. So around December, it was very prevalent in UK, but in the next couple of months, it spread to many countries across Europe. And also now it's been reported in California, Florida, and multiple states in the United States. Other countries also named there: Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, India. We all have the UK virus. The next one in the news you're always hearing is a South African variant. So South African variant was reported around August of last year. Again, pretty much similar. It is more transmissible. That means it spreads faster. And so there's a lot of circulating variants in South Africa. It's possible that we only found out this in August because some of the countries don't have the ability to do gene testing and genetic testing and all those things. That could be one of the reasons. But South African variant is also spreading in many countries, and it also has similar mutations of the spike protein. Again, there are multiple other variants. Another one we know here is the Brazilian variant. So again, I don't want to alarm or scare people. Variants are common, but there is no clear evidence that these variants are more deadlier. But we know for a fact it is more transmissible. And we also know the antibodies, artificially created antibodies in our body, could be less efficacious because of the variant. Again, consequences are faster spread. Again, no evidence of increased disease severity. And some of the tests, especially the antigen tests that we do for COVID-19, this virus could evade the detection. So that could be a problem, but there's very little evidence to show the PCR testing that we do are still pretty good. There was some data to suggest that it decreased the susceptibility to the monoclonal antibodies. So clearly that is a concern, but more to come. And Dr. Sham will talk about vaccine-induced immunity and the variant. We talk about Dr. Fauci. This is his statement. The viruses are going to continue to mutate, and we have to be nimble enough to keep up with them. So a lot of studies are being done daily. So what does that tell us? These viruses are mutating to live, and they live to mutate. So we need to do our part. That small step that we can take, the public health steps that we can take, can make a huge difference in how this viruses are going to mutate, or this virus is going to mutate in the future. The 3 W's: wash your hands, wear your mask, and watch your distance. If we can do that, we clearly can get to the other side, and Sham is going to help us with the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil Kumar, for that enriching presentation. And thank you for taking the extra effort in simplifying the complex concept of immunity and the virus activity. Highly appreciated for that additional effort. I know there will be a lot of questions, especially about the monoclonal antibody, the variant, everything. So I request the attendees, the participants, to put your questions in the chat box. We will answer those questions after Dr. Sham's presentation as well. So now let me introduce Dr. Sham. No, when I really looked at Dr. Sunil's and Dr. Shyam's snapshot bios, I was feeling so proud of the wealth of knowledge Indian origin professionals are bringing to the healthcare of United States. I know it is the same with other countries, like we have participants from Middle East, Saudi Arabia, sort of countries, and UK here, and then India, of course. So it is great, and thank God for all the wisdom he has given to everyone, especially to Indian professionals. Be proud of being an Indian. So Dr. Shyam Sundaran Kautilil is the director of the Division of Clinical Care and Research at the Institute of Human Virology, University of Maryland. And he is the chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases at the Department of Medicine, University of Maryland School of Medicine. Additionally, Dr. Shyam is the scientific director of the NIH DC program for AIDS Progress. So Dr. Shyam received his medical degree from Government Medical College, Thrissur, and his PhD in immunology of HIV infection from Memorial University of Newfoundland, Canada. Dr. Shyam completed a residency in internal medicine from Brown University, Rhode Island, and a fellowship in infectious diseases from the NIH under the famous Dr. Fauci. Dr. Shyam has conducted several pivotal studies, especially in the field of hepatitis C, and he has published over 300 peer-reviewed publications. Dr. Shyam is a fellow of the American College of Physicians and a fellow of the Infectious Diseases Society of America. He has received numerous accolades, including the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Meritorious Service Award for Innovations in Science in 2014 and the NIH Outstanding Mentor Award in 2013. So Dr. Shyam, welcome to the WMC's Health Forums event, and we are grateful for your time and your presence and effort for this event, as well as what you are contributing to the humanity. So Dr. Shyam, the podium is yours now.
Dr. Shyam, we're not able to hear you.
Shyam, can you
Dr.
go back?
Shyam, you're muted actually.
Apologize for that. Great.
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure. So thank you for World Malayali Association for inviting me to give this talk. And and thanks for Dr. Sunil Kumar for giving an excellent overview, makes my life easier. So in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll just go over the vaccines, the basic principles. I was asked to talk about two things. One was about Operation Warp Speed, and I'll stick to the facts about that, and then we'll jump into the SARS coronavirus 2 vaccines available. So Operation Warp Speed was a new initiative that started by the United States government to expedite the process of therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines for coronavirus. From the very beginning, healthcare experts understood that this is a pandemic which no one has experience of dealing with. The last pandemic we had was the Spanish flu about 100 years ago. Nobody understands the reason of how to deal with this pandemic. So they understood that even if you have a diagnostic, even if you have a treatment, you still need to make it to cater to a population of about 7 billion people. This is an unprecedented task, And even if you look at from a country perspective, in the United States, you have to deliver it to 350 million people, which is difficult. So that's why they developed this public-private partnership called Operation Warp Speed, where they brought in most of the heads of all the major federal government, DOD, CDC, FDA, NIH, and also major industry partners such as J&J and other other industry partners to bring in as a coalition to look at major focus areas of developing vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So what they wanted to focus on 3 areas: development and testing of all the efficacies of all these vaccines and drugs and diagnostics, supply and production, which is a major concern. Once you find that something is effective, how do you really deliver and distribute it to everyone? And finally, security and assurance of the project, because there are questions will come up about side effects, products, efficacies, etc. when you do field testing. So that was the major objective of this particular Operation Warp Speed. It's a public-private partnership. Even though people talk about it, this is the first example of a large-scale public-private partnership that in the United States. The goal was to, again, to cut the red tape and accelerate the production of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine. So they have all these group of people in there. They have executive committee members, even though many of these people are lead executive committee. They had specific committees in place that expertise in vaccinology, expertise in therapeutics, as well as in diagnostics. So these people will listen to you and then decide to fund these particular complaint. This is one of the things that is highlights what Operation Warp Speed does. So if you just look at this timeline, this is an average timeline to develop a vaccine. So about 73 months, 6 years. So it takes develop a product and R&D. Then you have to do a safety study, phase 1, 2 years of safety, phase 2 study, 2 years of phase 3 study, and then manufacture the product, and then get it distributed. So this is the normal time frame. So Operation Warp Speed wanted to reduce it significantly to within a year. And they accomplished that with the Moderna vaccine. So that is definitely to the credit of Operation Warp Speed. What they wanted to do, they combined a lot of these processes, which is unusual that you were doing a phase 3 study without phase 2 study. So all these things were completely unusual, but they wanted to accelerate with the objective of getting a therapeutic or a vaccine or a diagnostic test that could save millions of lives. So that's what's the major objective of this. Another component was ACTIV study, which is an accelerated COVID therapeutic intervention for vaccine study under the NIH. So this is the committee chairs headed by Francis Collins and CEO of J&J. They had all these executive committee trying to develop animal models, prioritization of the protocols, and then eventually take all these designs and do these clinical trials very quickly. I'm sure many of you have heard of these studies running in different centers. And so this is part of this public partnership to looking at different therapeutics you can actually develop. So the whole objective of this Operation Warp Speed is to just cut the red tape and get this out so that you can easily make available therapeutic options for people. So next, I will focus on vaccines. How does vaccines work? So vaccines are supposed to induce long-lasting protective immune response against infectious disease. So you have to do a direct infection. You got to take a piece of the infectious agent and give it to a patient. So you develop an immune response that will protect you from a real infection from that agent. So you won't get sick with it, but you will just get protected for a long time. So the idea is to give vaccination is to people who are not infected. This is not treatment. So people who are not infected, but at a higher risk of getting acquired infection. For coronavirus, that's all of us, right? The entire world population is susceptible to coronavirus. So that's the goal, to protect people from getting that infection. Few things to remember is that it does definitely take time to develop immune response. Even if you get one shot, it's a one-shot vaccine, it will still going to take 2 to 4 weeks for you to develop full-fledged immune response. So during that time, you're actually not protected. So we will need to follow up how long the protection will last. We just don't know, because all these things are happening very quickly. We don't know how long it lasts. Does it last for 1 year, last for 6 months, or do you have to get vaccinated like influenza vaccine every year? We just don't know that. Only time will tell. And there's some vaccines may actually help you with the disease progression. That means sometimes if you are vaccinated and you still get disease, you may get a milder disease. And we'll touch base on that, some of those things. So for any vaccine, there are 3 strategies we need to know before you make a vaccine. One we call a correlated protective immunity. This is something that, the immune system is wide, vast, broad. There are different components to it. So you need to know which part is the most critical and what is the most important factor you need to protect from getting a coronavirus. That's if you know that, that's the first step. The second step, then you need to take the piece of that virus that will induce that immunity in that person. So you have to use that as a component of vaccine. And the third, you need to make sure that actually give you long-lasting immunity. The strategies to use is that different forms of the virus, sometimes even in the whole virus, or sometimes you're using with the other carriers or something that enhance the inflammation reaction. Let me talk about correlative immunity. So if you know the correlative immunity, that's very easy. So far there are two vaccines that we really know correlative immunity, which is hepatitis B vaccine and influenza vaccine. So hepatitis B vaccine, if you develop antibodies at a particular level, then you know you're protected from getting new hepatitis B vaccination. So what that's tell you is that majority of the diseases where you have vaccines, even if vaccines are approved, we still don't know what is a measurable indication of immunity. So we don't know. So we just vaccinate and then we'll see whether these people get the disease. And so that's a clinical outcome that you look at it. On the other hand, you also know that some diseases you get, such as chickenpox or measles, you only get it once in your lifetime. So you probably the natural disease gives you lifelong protection. So the vaccines are inducing not antibody responses alone, but it also expressing extra responses on T cells, another component of immune system, which is also critical for a long living immunity for different components of disease. If you don't know the component of immunity, then it is really not, this strategy is not helpful. Then what you have to do you have to do backwards. That you develop a vaccine and assume that works, and then treat patients and see if that vaccine protects you from the disease, and then find out what is the correlate of immunity that protected some people. That is where we are with the coronavirus vaccine. We just don't know what the correlate of protection is, whether it's antibodies or not, but we know that there are candidates of vaccine that have proved to prevent infection. So once you want to know the immunity, what type of immunity you want to induce, then you can use different components of vaccination. For example, if you know antibodies protect you, then you can use proteins to use that. And that's a classic example of Novavax. Novavax vaccine was recently going to be approved in the UK. It's purely a spike protein based vaccine. So that's what it is. If you really want to induce T cell immunity, this long-lived immunity, there are a variety of different strategies. The best strategy we have is a live attenuated vaccine. That means a milder variety of vaccine. You can imagine that we will never use that for coronavirus because we don't know what happens with the mild variety. First of all, we don't understand the disease process. So that was a really no. There are some candidates being developed, but it will take a long time for us to use a live attenuated vaccine strain. Inactivated vaccine, mRNA vaccines are called that, they really induce good immunity in the system, both in the T cells and the antibody sites. So those are the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine or a mRNA vaccine. Sometimes if you cannot use the live virus, what we use a carrier, another virus that you can go in with, which is called something like adenovirus. That's what's been used for AstraZeneca. So you take adenovirus and infect people with adenovirus. You also put a small piece of coronavirus in it, so you get immunity to adenovirus as well as coronavirus. This was a very popular strategy 20 years ago, not so popular anymore, but we still have two different candidates for that, AstraZeneca and J&J. I will touch base on some of the concerns about adenovirus vaccine. You also have to give something that help you, the immune system, to recognize the vaccine and become a good immune response. They are called adjuvants. And you see that adjuvants are the common reason why you get soreness and fever, etc., associated with vaccination, because they are supposed to give you inflammation. And that's part of the strategy of vaccinating. So you give it, and they will give you a local inflammation. They allow the immune cells to come there to the site of vaccination and take up the vaccine and develop a big immune response. So that's a big part of it. And you just go away in 1 or 2 days. And that's what the most common adverse event for all vaccination strategies that you find. So let me just, without complication, give you a couple of figures to identify what different strategies mean. If you just look at antigen, antibodies are made by a cells called B cells. So B cells can recognize any form of antigen. It means give you an antigen like that, they can recognize it and make antibodies to it. And that's what you usually see for most of these vaccination. Hepatitis B vaccination, you give the protein, the B cells recognize it and make antibodies against it. On the T cells, if you really want T cell vaccination, the antigen has to undergo what you call as processing. It has to undergo a food processing time, which involves other cells, and then they chop down these pieces and then present it to T cells. And that's important. If you don't get this one, you don't get a good T cell response. And then if you don't get a good T cell response, you don't really get a better long-lived immunity. So ideally, we need to have both B and T cell response. So that's why the strategies, multiple different strategies are used. How do you get the T cells and the B cells to react at the same time? So this is one of the more novel advances has been the mRNA vaccination, the RNA-based vaccination. And I will just explain to you that don't ignore all these numbers. All you need to do that RNA is a piece of a nucleotide, right? So it is usually from the DNA goes to RNA to protein. So RNA is the middle step of something that comes from the DNA and a protein is synthesized. So in this case, you are getting the mRNA that codes for the protein. So you're not giving the protein, but you're giving the genetic code that gives you the protein. And then using that RNA, you immunize. They are taken by cells. This is the whole thing is a cell. And then they actually synthesize because they have the code, they can synthesize the protein. And when you synthesize the spike protein, you can synthesize the spike protein and express here. When you express here, the B cells will come and recognize it. But it can also chop it down into small pieces and present it in the context of to the T lymphocytes and get a T response. And the T cells and the B cells can work in tandem. So now you get a very stable immune response. So this was the principle of an mRNA-based vaccination. And this has been around for a long time, but this is the first time that we ever made a vaccine that is approved, or at least in the pathway to approval for any disease. This is the first such strategy is in the SARS coronavirus 2. So what do we have right now? So these are the variety of different vaccines that we actually hear. So mRNA-based vaccines, the development was very fast because a lot of people, it's expedited. Operation Warp Speed was involved in the Moderna vaccine. You require 2 doses, and the manufacturers are Pfizer and Moderna. Viral vector, so medium development, you need 1 dose for the J&J vaccine, 2 for most of the other ones. Is an AstraZeneca has adenovirus-based vaccine, J&J has a vaccine, Sputnik is also an adenovirus-based vaccine, and Sinopharm is also a viral vector-based vaccine. The protein subunit vaccine is a Novavax that is also approved. There are 2 shots of Novavax, and it's also a very fast developmental pathway of moving forward. So next, coming to the real data, this probably will explain 2 important points. So this is the data on the efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine. If you look at Moderna, it's pretty much identical. So the placebo is a purple arm. The y-axis here is the probability of getting infected. So this is, as this number goes up, that means more and more people who received placebo got infected during the trial. So the trial is all for 120 days. And the red indicates people actually got infected within the vaccinated arm. So the 2 points I wanted to highlight is that here is the first shot, okay? And the second shot for Pfizer is right here. After the second shot, look at it, very, very few infections. So it is very efficacious in preventing symptomatic infections, COVID infections after you give 2 shots. That's point number 1. The point number 2 is that until you get that second shot, you can think about it. It's these 2 weeks that's highlighted here. The placebo and the vaccinated arm are identical. That means really you're not protected at all during that first 2 weeks of time or the 10 to 12 days of time from getting COVID-19. There are identical risk like you have for the placebo arm. This highlights the point that Dr. Sunil Kumar mentioned earlier, is that you still have to wear a mask, wash your hands, and keep your distance in protecting you from getting infected. The side effect profile, we have a lot of confusion about side effect profile. This is a side effect profile for Pfizer vaccine. Again, I want to highlight 3 points. So the first point is that these are the common side effects that are reported. The side effects are usually, as I said, because you use adjuvant, you need to create an inflammation on the site of infection. Most of them are related to that. So you get an immune response, the fatigue, headache, muscle pain, joint pain, these are the common side effects that have been reported. That's the first point of time. Those are the common side effects that are reported. The second point is that if you're older, more than 40, 55 years old, you're more likely to see more side effects than if you're someone younger. Okay. The third point I was going to say is that the second dose, as you can see here, you're likely to get more side effects than the first dose. So anticipate that second dose. Most people will have very minimal side effect. That does not mean the vaccine is not efficacious. It is just because how your body is reacting to the immunization schedule. A lot of the side effects that people highlighted in social media are very rare, and we really cannot tell they are related to vaccination. So that is some of these strategies we have to understand. Most of the allergic response, you can be allergic to anything possible. Anything substance you can be allergic, and you can have serious allergic reaction to anything, because none of us actually tested for every single thing out there to determine we are allergic to that, and we just don't know. There are some components in the vaccine, like a pegylated, PEG is another common, is a polyethylene glycol moiety, and very rarely, very few people have known allergy to PEG. And those people are the only people who are to be concerned about taking that vaccination. Otherwise, there is no data to date to suggest that people who have severe allergies will at higher risk of developing complication. Most of the allergies that we eventually would turn out are to allergy to the components of the vaccination. Some vaccines like influenza will have eggs. So if you're allergic to eggs, you can get allergic reaction to egg. That's expected. But the egg is not included in this vaccine, so it is not completely understood. But you also have to understand there is no vaccination that's going to immunize millions and millions of people. And when you immunize millions and millions of people, you're going to get some kind of side effect on these people, and they're going to be reported as side effects. So that does not necessarily mean they are side effects for the vaccination. So the next, I want to end by answering some relevant questions that come up. And I'm just going to go through it, and if there are any concerns, you can always ask. First thing to remember is that vaccines only protect symptomatic infection. You can still get vaccinated and get a very mild disease infection. So that's again, you have to be worried about. If you're a sick parent at home, you could get infected if you go and party and then come back and you could infect those people. That's something to understand. You have to really remember that part of it. There is nothing to check after vaccination because we don't know what to check. Let me check whether my vaccine worked or not because I had no side effects. That doesn't mean much. You're wasting money. You don't need to check anything. That's really not a good thing to do. Long-term efficacy, we don't know. Just wait, stay tuned. As we have more data, they will understand about what that means and whether it lasts every year or is it for more than a year or lifetime. Infected person, what if you already have COVID infection? Should I take it again? Or maybe I thought I had COVID infection. So the general principle is that we don't really know what to do at this time. So what is that we think that when you have COVID, you're probably protected for some time to getting another infection. That's point one. The point two is that we usually make antibodies yourself against COVID. And if you take a vaccine at that time, it will interfere with the vaccine's efficacy. So the CDC recommendation is that you wait for 90 days or 3 months and then take the vaccine. If you've already taken one, you can delay the second shot for 90 days or take the whole series again after 90 days. And that's not based on data, but just as a learn of just general expert opinion about this. Delayed vaccine schedule has been used in many places. It just came up before on this discussion. If that is the option that's available for you, just take it. It's a supply demand issue, right? Whether you delay the vaccine for another month or so, would that have probably not much of difficulty, but you just have to assume that during that time before the second shot, you're probably not protected. The efficacy is established in the population. A lot of people say, hey, how do we know the Indians or Malayalis are protected, Tamilians are protected? We don't know because we have to do these studies in large number of patients to figure those things out. Right now, we know that overall protection is very high, and of symptomatic disease is quite high. And so we generally recommend everybody should be vaccinated. It will take time for us to figure out different ethnicities are there. So second shot is more likely to give you more symptoms. So the first shot is fine. So be prepared for that. And there is no need to pre-medicate with medication. Just take it. Usually most of the symptoms are fine. Just maybe have a low-grade fever, that's all. Am I protected after first dose? No, you're not protected up until 2 weeks. So you have to be aware of that. What do I do if I develop COVID symptoms? Again, if you have COVID symptoms, you should get tested. And if you test positive COVID symptom, delay the second shot at least for another 90 days or take the whole thing after 2 days. Can sick people, hospitalized people take the vaccine? Yes. Look, when you're sick or when you're taking medications that suppress your immunity, it's a twofold risk. Then you are at a higher risk of developing serious disease. So you need to be vaccinated. But on the other hand, you may also have less efficacy of vaccination because you're taking medications that are suppressing immunity. So that means our current recommendation is that you should definitely take the vaccine because the risk of taking the vaccine is much better than having a serious disease. Pregnancy is, again, if you are a healthcare provider, that's what people are vaccinated, and you are pregnant, you are recommended to be vaccinated. So based on your risk, if you're pregnant, if you're not a healthcare provider, you're not at risk for developing COVID, you should discuss with your provider and find out what's the best solution is there. The common side effects that I mentioned are trivial, really not major concern, but obviously, people have to be concerned. If you have concern about side effects, you should report so that we collect the data and understand what's happening with the side effect profile. So in summary, Operation Warp Speed is an unprecedented public-private partnership aimed at accelerating development and cutting the red tape. So what they can show for is developing a Moderna vaccine. I think Moderna vaccine happened very quickly and ran into this. It's not over yet because they are also committed in distribution of it and production of it, which is where other major challenges are. The current vaccinations are safe and effective in preventing symptomatic COVID-19, so that's kind of recommended. Further studies, again, are needed to look at whether these vaccines protect against new variants. And I think that these things will come in social media, but at this point in time, we just don't know whether these vaccines will protect. We just don't know whether they protect or they don't protect. So right now, just get vaccinated and we'll see for more data to come up. The major threat for containing the pandemic are the people who refuse to immunize themselves and the emergence of new variants that may escape the vaccines. One is completely preventable. The second one is we don't know yet. So if you don't have people vaccinate, and if these vaccines work against the new variants, then you will be able to finish the pandemic in about a year. But if people don't get vaccinated, and we tend to see more and more variants that escape the vaccine, we are looking for the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sham, for that wonderful talk where the explanation is right enough for the common people, layperson to understand and take some key points with them to discuss with the family and maybe the co-workers and everyone they ask for advice. Now it is the time for Q&A. For having a quiet, silent meeting room, I request and recommend to post your questions in the chat and we will have the speakers answer them. So looking at the questions, several people responded that the presentations are awesome. Thank you for that. So the question is, I want to know, this is from Dr. Susan Joseph, I want to know whether a couple who is planning to conceive now can go ahead with the vaccine. So I hope Dr. Sunil and Dr. Sham both are unmuted.
Sorry, I'm reading a different question. What was the question again?
The question is whether a couple who is planning to conceive now can go ahead with the vaccine. Is it safe to take?
Yeah, absolutely. Even pregnant women are able to take vaccines. So there is of course, is there any data on safety of fetus, unborn fetus? There is no data, and right now there is no data to think of otherwise as well. So if you're at risk, let me remind you that right now in the United States, because of the supply demand, it's basically an emergency use authorization for vaccine. So you are at either a long-term care facility resident or providing service there or a healthcare provider. Those are the two criteria being prioritized. As more and more relaxation happen, older people, everybody will be vaccinated. Everybody should be vaccinated. You should just go with the guidance. There is no particular risk of waiting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sham. So that answers whether pregnant ladies can take it. That question also is already answered in this answer. So the next question is from Annie Palliot. Please, can we know after getting COVID infection, how long we have to wait to take the vaccine? I know it was addressed, but if you just want to.
Yeah, so that's 90 days is what CDC recommend. So 90 days after you recover from it, you can take the whole vaccine. It also comes up in after one shot, you got vaccine, what you will do. There is no, like most of the, I would recommend, okay, you could either go ahead, take your second shot, or just delay the second shot till, delay after, first of all, you have to make sure you really had COVID, right? Because there are a lot of symptoms right now in the winter time, may not be COVID related. If you do have COVID, wait for 90 days and take the second shot, or sometimes you may even have to start the whole vaccination series again after 90 days.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Mr. Jacob Kadasanad. Is it advisable to take Tylenol as prophylactic after taking corona vaccine? So Mr. Jacob is asking whether before getting the fever, is it advisable to take Tylenol?
The package insert said no insert, no Tylenol before, but you can take it afterwards. So unless so there you can just wait, because most of the time you may not have any symptoms. You probably don't need to take Tylenol. So you just don't need to wait for it. And during the next 6 to 8 hours time and see if you develop fever or something, then take Tylenol. But don't take it before.
So Ansi, I think Ansi is joining us from UK. She has a question. Is there any complication or side effects if we take the second dose delayed in between 4 to 12 weeks? It looks like in UK they are delaying the second dose. So is there any complication or
Right.
side effect?
Right. So I think there is no safety concerns about it. You're not at risk for developing more side effects. If you're a purist academician, you only go with what the data is from the trial, which is for Pfizer vaccine 3 weeks after the first dose and 4 weeks after for Moderna vaccine 4 weeks after the first dose. But I am sure that there are studies ongoing looking at long-term efficacy of this dosing regimen. So if academically people don't endorse it, academician, but from a policy point of view, if you're going to vaccinate, if that's all vaccination you're going to get it, I would recommend to take it.
Okay, good. So next is a $1 million question from Dr. Susan Joseph. Which vaccine is the best?
You cannot compare. It's not like grocery shopping. You cannot go to Safeway and find out, because they are not studied head to head. Okay, the endpoints are different. So you cannot compare between studies. Like we cannot compare studies from one cardiac competitor to that is not something you can compare. But the good news is that the studies reported for most of these vaccines are very high. I reviewed a lot of these vaccines before. The sample size of 40,000 was based on an assumption of an efficacy of 60%. 60%. We were pleasantly surprised. So probably the only very few good things that happen in there being that you have vaccines that protect, high 90s, or even most of these vaccines are more than 80%, which is not expected before. So overall, there shouldn't be any difference. You cannot really compare between the vaccines. And I think right now the recommendation is that you take one Pfizer vaccine, you should take Pfizer vaccine the second shot. That's another question that come up, because they're pretty identical vaccines. Could you mix and match? Right now, that's not recommended. But if the supply become an issue, those things all come up.
So in brief, we don't compare apples to oranges now. So next question is from Cicely. Those who have taken 2 doses of Moderna vaccine are also becoming COVID positive. Why? How effective these vaccines are? So at least the second part we already covered. So what is it about 2 doses of Moderna vaccine and still COVID positive?
Right. This is a very important question. I just mentioned it in my, I'll reiterate again, because it's how the trials are done. So trials did was they immunized people, right? And then told them provided them with a list of symptoms. If you have a headache, you have a fever, if you have a sore throat, come back. We'll test you for coronavirus. Okay, and then you come back and then you are test positive, you have coronavirus, that is a case 1. So that will tell you that if you're symptomatic coronavirus infections, that were prevented 95% in the coronavirus. That does not mean that you have milder disease, that you actually didn't have any of those symptoms, but you could be positive. In order to prove that, what they had to do, they had to take every trial participant and check them with the nasal swab every week until the trial is ending, which is extraordinary work, and so they couldn't do it. None of the vaccines actually done it. So that point is unclear. So it's not surprising that you could get disease, that coronavirus disease, even after vaccination. That's possible, especially because that's not shown to prevent all COVID-19 transmission. It's supposed to prevent symptomatic COVID disease 95%.
So thank you, Dr. Sham. So now the question from Mr. Pramod. Can we understand if the person who never tested for COVID and he is going for vaccination, but the day if he is a carrier of COVID-19, how the vaccination will be effective? Is there a chance for any complication? Deep question.
Right, so you have a asymptomatic transmission, right? So that you have an asymptomatic COVID. There is no chronic carrier, COVID. If you get COVID, you have viremia for like 5 to 7 days. That's it. Most people will get better. So if you are in that 4 to 5 time, they usually ask you, do you have any symptoms? And if you have symptoms, they won't give you a vaccine. Okay, that just to avoid that scenario. In the unlikely scenario that you have COVID, then your vaccine is not going to protect you. If there is no deleterious event for the vaccine, it's not going to make you. So the question is whether the vaccine will work for you. You are not protected by vaccination now. You're protected by the disease. So your recommendation will be wait 90 days and get revaccinated again.
Okay, that is a complex answer anyway. So this is about penicillin allergy. If a person has penicillin allergy, can she take the vaccination?
Yeah, there is no contraindication for penicillin allergy. It's a PEG allergy, polyethylene glycol allergy is the only one that is concerned. If you have serious PEG allergy, which is an unrecognized medical entity, that's the only one. These allergies are common. Like 10% of the world, US population have serious food allergy. So they don't have, you don't have 10% of adverse events with the vaccination.
Okay, so this is about like BCG vaccine, your TB test is positive for life. So maybe the PPD is always positive after receiving BCG vaccine. Is this same with COVID? Question from Mr. Biju Paul.
I don't, and so is it if you are a positive TB test, is it okay to vaccinate or is it?
No, it is like, I think comparing with having that PPD positive forever, Biju is asking whether COVID also, is it going to be the same?
I don't think so. Go ahead.
I can take that. So when you're talking about COVID testing, what we are testing is actually the antigen. So either we are testing the antigen or we are testing PCR and looking at the viral particles and not really antibodies. So with the vaccine, we are producing antibodies in your body. And so it shouldn't be. The test can still be positive if you get sick. And the test is not going to turn positive because you took vaccine.
Okay, Dr. Sunil, thank you. So the next question is, I know we talked about people becoming positive and then the vaccination part. So the person took the first dose, then became COVID positive. So when do they need to take the second dose, or do they need to start all over?
Yeah, so that's a clinical judgment. And I think there are 2 options I mentioned. One is to delay the second dose 90 days after, or redo the vaccination 90 days after. Because the second vaccine efficacy will be lowered if you already have COVID. So you probably, the best safe measure if the patient is higher risk, probably to wait 90 days and get the full vaccination done again.
So after both doses of vaccine, we do need to still continue the 3 Ws, no? Dr. Sunil?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like Sham mentioned, I mean, this doesn't prevent you from getting infected. You can still get infected and transmit the disease to other people. This is only vaccines are only going to prevent you from getting sick, really sick, symptomatically or clinical disease. So yes, we still need to prevent transmission till everybody gets vaccinated.
Okay, yes, that is the message we want to emphasize. Vaccination is the way out, but we are not at the end yet. So Mr. Syriac is asking from the available information, which vaccine is most effective? We already said all are effective. Those numbers, maybe 1% here or there, is not a big difference. Now, Lekha is asking, my coworker stated that there is a case of Bell's palsy reported after COVID vaccination. Is it a relevant information?
Bell's palsy is common. So there are common things that happen after the vaccination of large number of people. You really cannot associate a causality of it. If there are what we have is a registry people follow. If 1% of all people develop Bell's palsy, then there is association. But if it's only 1% after 10 million doses get Bell's palsy, that is not an association. So causality has to be established. So none of these adverse events, unfortunately, with the social media, anything that gets spread very fast, and we just don't have opportunities to cross-check all the facts and association with vaccine. So that's the situation we are in here. So there is built-in measures from the FDA to look at all the adverse events that are reported to them to make the determination they put out when the vaccine will be eventually approved.
We have the most powerful compensation plan ever in the history of network marketing. You have to imagine 60 years in this amazing companies.
We can hear who is talking. We can't hear. Sorry.
No.
We can hear.
Hello.
They can hear us.
So it is not.
Biju, please mute. Biju, please mute.
It's not me.
Okay.
No, you can mute whoever speaking.
I'm not the host anymore.
We do not. So we are protected from that standpoint as well. It's a digital world. So this, we are looking into the future. That's why the prevention is better than cure.
Hari, can you mute the host?
We don't ask people, we don't pay them more money to bring them in.
I'm not sure who that is.
Still, you can mute. You are the co-host, Biju, with the phone.
It's muted already. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Let me read the next question. This is Reshma Raji from Dubai. Some post in media says for cancer patients or patients with chronic diseases, Pfizer is recommendable over other vaccines like Sinopharm. Any suggestions?
No, I don't think you can compare with them. So there are. So let me just read. Sinopharm and vaccinations it's a Chinese-made vaccine, right? So and it's a killed vaccine, and the efficacy is quite not clearly established, and so we never tested in the United States. This is started in Brazil, where they have disappointing results. So the question becomes whether that is an efficacious vaccine or not, and that is something that that is always unanswered question. Same thing with some other vaccine candidates. But the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna vaccine studies.
Only James can make you because he is the host.
So there is no specific information whether it works better for cancer patients or not.
Okay, you invested 2,499 euros. Hello. Hello, Dr. Sham.
Dr. Sham is still showing here as co-host.
I think someone else is asking a question. I think he's trying to ask a question.
I'm from Dublin, Sham. My name is also Sham. Can I?
Please.
Okay. My wife is on a biological infusion and she's a chronic arthritic patient.
So she has already taken 2 doses, even the booster dose has been taken. So for how long can she, when is the next biological injection that she can take? For how long gap she should have before having this next biological infusion rather?
It's great question. So there is no current recommendations on altering or delaying based biological treatment that's associated with the vaccination strategy. So she should go ahead with a rheumatologist recommendations or continuing a TNF biological inhibitors moving forward with that. It should not technically interfere with the vaccination efficacy at all. On the other hand, high dose steroids, chemotherapy for cancer and things like that, they're much more challenging. And we just don't know answers for that at the time. But I think for most of the milder immunomodulatory agent treatment, Rheumatological Society is recommending continuing those treatment despite vaccination strategies.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Dr. Shah. Thank you very much for your expert opinion here. Thank you.
Hello, doctor. My name is Dr. Rajiv. Can you hear?
Yep.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Hello. Can I ask a question? I am Dr. Raji.
Yeah, go ahead, ask.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Speak slowly, please.
I am a consultant physician talking from Dubai. I am a victim of COVID, and I was admitted in a hospital for 2 weeks with COVID, and I survived. My question is, see, afterwards, I checked my antibody here in one hospital, that is IgG antibody. It was showing more than 120. Meanwhile, one of our patient who was a COVID victim, and that was 6 months back, then afterwards he has taken the Sinopharm vaccine. He also come along with me for this testing of the IgG antibody. His IgG antibody was only 30 and mine was more than 120. My question is whether is there any need for me to take the vaccination now after 3 months, or if there is a chance of taking it, see whether this antibody by the natural mechanism is better or this antibody induced by the vaccine is better.
Great. That's a very good question. Thank you. I'm glad to know that you're doing okay after COVID.
Thank you.
And so I mentioned in my talk that we don't really have a correlate of an antibody titer as a protection for vaccination, right? So we don't really know, we don't really have any information to go by that particular thing. So what is this recommendation? What is the disease and vaccination strategy? Vaccination has shown to prevent new symptomatic infections, right? We did clinical trials with placebo-controlled studies that show that vaccination work against preventing infection. So the question is, can natural disease protect you? We don't know that yet, right? Because no one has actually studied whether you have COVID, are you going to be completely immune for getting a new COVID infection for the rest of your life, or 3 months or 6 months. We don't know that information yet. So the general advice and assumption is that having survived COVID is not a lifetime protective measure. It's not an alternative to a vaccination, right? So you will still recommend vaccination. Then the next question is that if you have a lot of natural antibodies, what is the best time for you to get vaccinated? From all the data that we looked at, not individually, people think that about 90 days of waiting is a really good time where your natural antibodies have gone down to the level that you can safely be immunized and immunization can be effective. So that's the recommendation to you. Natural disease may not protect you, but vaccines do. And delaying for 90 days will ensure that vaccines work best.
Thanks a lot, doctor, for both of you for the great presentation. Thank you.
I have one question. How about taking ivermectin for this disease? Is it a preventive measure? There are studies going on in South Africa and India, but they don't recommend in US.
Right. So, yeah, I can take that. So the entire use of ivermectin in COVID-19 started with a lab study done in Australia. They were able to prevent viral multiplication in the lab. So ivermectin obviously is a well-tolerated medication that we have been using for decades. So people started using it. But the problem is, one, there is no randomized controlled trial. There's only retrospective analysis done. And the second problem is to get enough steady state level or enough for the medication level in your body, the recommended dosing is not enough. So we need to have all that information before we can recommend ivermectin use. But people are using it because it's such a benign drug. And just like so many other drugs we're using in COVID-19.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. I will go back to the questions in the chat. So we talked about waiting for 90 days after COVID disease for taking the vaccine. In UK, it looks like they're asking or offering vaccine after 28 days of infection. Is there any complications related to taking it at 28 days as opposed to 90 days?
No, so the disclaimer is that we really don't know, right? I think we should be, proud enough to acknowledge what we know, what we don't know. We don't know how the people who are recovered from COVID react. But the best medical knowledge, we think that 90 days would be the optimal time we can give vaccination and vaccination can be effective. Can it be effective in 28 days? No one has actually done a study in people who recovered COVID with vaccination to begin with. So we just don't know. A lot of these are expert opinion. So the current recommendation here is to just wait 90 days, which is very arbitrary. So it's not like based on randomized control studies or strong data. So right now that's assumption. And so I'm sure that other countries may use certain that's optimal for them as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sham. Next question is from Lisa Ram. For seniors with underlying conditions, is it still safe for them to take the same dosage of it? Would it lead to any complications? I think I will answer that question. Seniors with underlying conditions, they have increased risk or higher risk for contracting COVID-19, and their disease can be fatal as compared to other people. So the benefits of taking vaccine outweighs the risk of side effects from the vaccine. And on the additional note, I work with older adults population with all these underlying conditions, which are probably not very well controlled in several cases. However, over 100 people I have been observing for all their duration of first and second dose have not seen them having any complications related to the vaccine. It is not something to say that 0% of complication. However, the complication risk is way lower than the complication from getting the disease. Is there anything we need to add there, Dr. Sunil, Dr. Sham?
You're absolutely right. Risk versus benefits.
Risk versus benefit.
So Reshma Reggie from Dubai, a COVID positive patient was advised to take vaccination after 90 days. So does it apply for those who have taken the vaccination? Do we need to go for a second round after 2 jabs? The question is actually not clear to me. No, once we take 2 doses, we are assuming for now we are good to go. We don't know how long the immunity lasts. We will have to wait for the further studies. But after 2 doses, none of these vaccine manufacturers officially announced the need for a booster. Isn't it, Dr. Sham?
Yeah, I believe the question is, wait till 90 days and vaccinate the full dose of vaccination. Yeah, that's what the recommendation is, to wait till 90 days. You're probably not going to get infected again within 90 days. So that's quite reasonably safe.
So Mr. Dominic Joseph from Delhi, there is a news that many countries are going to face the next terrific wave of COVID pandemic. That's a scary question. Is it right?
So we don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball into figuring this out. I think the major concern, as Dr. Sunil Kumar and who he can comment on it, he pointed out, is the emergence of new variants. See, viruses are like any other living being, right? We adapt and they adapt and leave. So they adapt as we go through multiple different people over time. They develop features that make them adapt better. So most of these new variants that described here have not because of the immune pressure. They are developed because they adapt to the receptor much better. They bind to ACE2 much better. Hence, they're more infectious and say have adaptability to spread and thing. So this is a constant battle that's happening. So we don't, what we do, they definitely are more infectious. our strategy is not changed. We just have to protect people by the 3 W's Dr. Sunil Kumar said, as well as vaccinating people. Those are the things we have right now is working. We have to continue to do that. If these variants are vaccine escape mutants and they are more transmissible and more fit, then we are looking into an re-emergence and another spike of infections in places. We don't have any evidence to suggest that's the case.
Yeah, if I may add a couple of things, Sam is absolutely right. We are at the crossroads, right? So it's going to depend on how fast we vaccinate the population versus how fast these variants are going to transmit. So all the more it makes it very important for us to continue with those public health measures, because we are at that point. It depends entirely on our behavior.
Thank you. Yes, quite true. Question. Three of my coworkers developed lymph enlargement post-vaccination. Is there any other data supportive of this lymph node enlargement after vaccination?
I'm assuming it's near the site of the injection, right? So what you're inducing is an immune response and an inflammation response. So we all react differently. That's why we have different side effect profiles. Some people have mild disease, and some people have a fever, some people get sick. So this means just the draining lymph nodes are excited because of that in vaccination. So this is unexpected. Unless it is in a completely different site, then that's a different story. But if it's in the same draining site in the axilla, that region, that is probably an exaggerated response seen in 3 people. It's not unusual. It's an expected exaggerated response.
The next question is also about someone who was positive prior and then taking the vaccine. Since that question comes a lot, I am reading it again. We have a person who had COVID and took his first dose of vaccine after 10 days of becoming negative. Now scheduled for second dose after 21 days. Is there any harm to take the second dose considering the history that person was infected and became negative only 1 month back?
Yeah, it's not the question of any harm with the vaccination. A question is that whether vaccination is going to be as effective as somebody who did not have COVID. So again, the idea is vaccination is to protect people who have never had COVID from getting COVID. So what we think that when you have COVID, that can interfere because your natural immune response can interfere with vaccination strategy. So that's why the delay strategy is recommended. So I think that's still the recommendation in the US, but I can see that it's happening all over and people are getting vaccinated whenever vaccines are available. So that's also the case. So still the right answer is that wait for 90 days and get vaccinated.
So this is another question from Mr. Pramod. While taking vaccination, my present antibody strength will it reduce? Probably, I am assuming this person was positive and developed some antibodies because of the disease. So whether that antibody, which is still there, is it going to go away?
So somebody who got an infection, they will have antibodies, but we don't know whether they are protective antibodies, right? And I think that's what the big question is, because we don't know whether they actually protect you from getting infected again. We just don't know. But the vaccination, whatever it does, it is protecting you from it. So that is a proof that there is vaccination will protect. There is no proof that the disease will protect. So that's what vaccination is emphasized on people even after they get COVID. The second point of not delaying the vaccination is just because it doesn't want to interfere with your natural immune response to the disease and developing good immune response to the vaccine. That's why you're delaying it.
Okay, so we are coming to the last question of the day, but I know this conversation is going to continue. This is from Remy Matthews. There will be herd immunity when a lot of people get vaccinated. That is what I see here. But I assume the question is maybe what percentage of people need to get vaccinated for that magic number, or give us a little bit more on the herd immunity.
Yeah, I think this is the coin people have been used a lot in news media, but that's not the question. The question is how much susceptible population is here, because it's a dynamic situation. So you have herd immunity to COVID and you have a new variant that doesn't protect you, then you're back to square one, right? So your question is that how much susceptible people remain and what can you make to protect the susceptible people from developing new infection? The two things drive. One, number of susceptible people in the community, and the second, the viral load that is circulating in the community. So if you can reduce one, and they're dependent on each other, if you can reduce, reduce the susceptible population, then the viral load will go down, and that's how you deal with the pandemic, whether it is influenza or any of those things. That's the strategy. So it's a dynamic situation right now. If there is no concern about new variants, then immunizing a lot of people and protecting them would be the best bet we have to control the pandemic in a reasonable amount of time, which is probably in a year.
Dr. Sunil, do you want to add anything?
I think he already answered that. I'm good.
Okay, so anything more before we conclude and give it to Mr. Biju for conclusion of today's session?
I think most questions were answered, I guess. Thank you, Doctors Sunil Kumar and Dr. Shyam, for spending time with us this morning. It has been very informative. There's a lot of takeaway to take home, right? So ultimately, get vaccinated. Okay, that's the rule. All right, so without further delay, I know it's getting late before people in India. Thank you for patiently waiting. I invite our WMC Treasurer, Thomas Chalet, to offer a word of thanks. Thomas?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Thomas Chalet, Treasurer, WMC, American Region. It was a nice day today, and it was a nice discussion. Firstly, I'm thanking you for the global chairman, A.B. Anu, and global president, Joni Kurivula, and American region chairman, Hari Nambudiri, and chairman Hari Nambudiri, and President Thankam Aravind, and global admin VP TP Vijayan, and VP Global American SK Charian, and all the province leaders and American region executive board members. Thank you for this wonderful time, and it was very informative discussion. And we did our chief guest, Dr. Sunil Kumar and Dr. Shyam Sundar, and they gave a very informative discussion is going on. And it was we personally myself, it was very good information I got it. I was trying to, I didn't take the medication and this COVID medication because of, I have doubt this any problem in future or something because I'm a diabetic person. So it's very clear and clarified that I can take positive, I can take this one medicine very comfortably. And this our seminar conducted mainly, our health forum chairperson Leda Joseph. She's initiated, and we supported to conduct this meeting, this seminar, and also without these three people, Leta Joseph and Dr. Sunil Kumar and Shyam Sundar, is not possible because of these three people. they did a great success, and we cleared most of the questions, all the questions, I think. All the questions cleared, and especially for me, it is spiritually and, financially, mentally, and, I am comfortable because I took also, financially, I took a lot of, shares from medical shares, so are going up. So that's why it's success. I'm praying for this medication to be positive success. So, but till now, I heard this, all the medication is going to be 95%, 70 to 95% is going to success. So this has been, doctor, so many in our community also, so many doctors have participated, but this Sunil, Dr. Sunil and Dr. Sham, this has been very well. And thank you for all this, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for, you explained it very well, and we appreciate your, participation, and we are, committed to you for the WMC, committed for you, and also anytime if anybody need any help, and WMC will open for everyone and help. We are ready to help. And thank you for this wonderful time, and also for the Zoom moderators and all the WMC people and the WMC members and whoever in the Zoom. And it was, I think it's very fruitful, that's a discussion, and in future, and welcome to all. And thank you for all members to participate, and all the guests, chief guests. And once again, thank you everyone from WMC. Thank you.
I'm sure that will be a continued discussion on this, and we will, Leda Joseph, we can look into after a month or so, we can have a second session, but there are a lot of questions will be coming soon, more and more, when this vaccination is done to common people. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So
it was a great presentation, Dr. Sunil and Shyam. Thank you so much for joining with us today. And
thank you for having us.
Yes, as Hari said, that we can have a follow-up session maybe after a couple of months, and so see that how people are doing, and more of an interactive sessions. Because of COVID, I think most probably by end of April, I think probably 90% of population may be getting it. I think maybe end of April or May. Then after that, I think a follow-up session that we can have. Thank you so much.
I think Mr. T.P. Vijayan, our Vice President Admin, would like to say a few words.
No, thanks. I was just enjoying it, and yes, and I was really understanding the whole, the intricacies of the scenario, means the what you call the vaccine effects, and nothing else. Awesome presentation, and we all are really beneficial from both doctors, particularly in this means such time. We all Keralites are proud of our professionals working in medical fields in US. Thank you. Congratulations to hearty congratulations to the entire team of America region, the chairman, the president, and the secretary, general secretary, and the treasurer. All of you have done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And anybody else would like to have a few words to Dr. Sunil and Shyam will be appreciated. And if not, we can wind up.
Sorry, I didn't mention two names. Secretary Biju Chako and Vice President Jacob Kurisinad also is, they participated and helped, a lot of help they did. Thank you for the help.
And one more thing that I wanted to say here, and to James Goodall, because he was the whole time from morning 8 o'clock, and he's with us and transcribing our Zoom link to the Facebook, and you can even go back and watch the link. YouTube link also. So please make use of it, and you can share to your friends as well. And, for further questions, because very, very informative sessions this is.
Yeah, thank you, David.
To benefit out of it.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Shyam and Dr. Sunil. And I had been in touch with the Dr. Shyam earlier for our initial program, but we could not make it work out. But at least this time I was able to see the presentation and really appreciate that. There's quite a wealth of information here to see. So really enjoyed all the details. Thanks a lot. We will surely interact more in the future.
Anyone else? And we are really, really glad that all over the globe, people have been participated, Dr. Shyam and Sunil. And then this is, you could able to share your wonderful knowledge to the people across the globe. And truly appreciate Lita Joseph and for wonderful organizing things like, I have been working with her for the last NINA team, but really, really, we are fortunate to have Lita with us. And hopefully we can see that wonderful program from now onwards. Thank you, Lita. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions or to say a few words?
I had a question actually. I wanted to clarify with Dr. Shyam. I thought that quite a lot of people are resistant, almost 99%. So is there a natural way of finding out if someone is resistant to the virus? Because they become asymptomatic. So that's what I feel then.
Right. So the resistance for infection or resistant to disease, right? So two different things. I don't think, we don't know anything that people are resistant to infection. Everybody's susceptible to get COVID-19 if you have adequate exposure. I mean, like just because you hang out with somebody who turned out to be COVID and you tested negative, it's not means that's just lucky. It's not chance. So there is nothing to suggest that you're actually protected from right now. But the other question is that are you at risk of developing severe disease? A lot of people will be no symptoms and then they test for antibodies, they find out that they're COVID. That's really there. There are a lot of people who have mild disease. What are the factors? So all the factors we know about other comorbidities and all, the biggest factor is age. Every 10 years after 50 years, there is a twofold increase in developing serious disease. So that's what we know for sure. All the other comorbidities are there because that's, but the age seems to be the major factor that's determining serious symptomatic disease.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Nishad, are you there? Nishad, are you there? I see you. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, my call.
Nishad is actually a young physician working in the emergency department, dealt with COVID a lot. Nishad, what do you feel about having this vaccine and then having some light at the end?
So it's both hopeful and disappointing because we have a vaccine that works better than expected, and yet we have a vaccine distribution process which is vastly worse than expected. Having a vaccine doesn't help unless it goes into people's arms. And I think that's the part that we need to actually emphasize. There's a lot of misinformation and fear about getting the vaccine. So our next step will be a massive public health and communication campaign to try and convince people that this is what will help get us out. The sooner we get the vaccine into arms and get everyone vaccinated, the sooner we can return back to normal. So that's what's exciting, but that's our next challenge.
So Nishad is a physician, actually from Maryland. I think he's in. Nishad, could you tell us where do you work? Second year of residency, no?
Yes, I'm second year of residency in New York. So I've been dealing with this since February, March when I first arrived in the U.S. So yeah.
So what do you mean by better than expected?
So the vaccination, historically, our vaccines have not been 95% effective in preventing symptomatic disease or severe symptomatic disease. If you look at, for the flu, typically our rates are more like 50 to 60% in any given year. Our initial vaccines were, for Moderna and Pfizer, were 95% essentially, in at least in terms of preventing severe symptomatic disease. We don't know whether it prevents transmission, if these patients are actually getting the disease and passing it on, but at the very least, preventing severe symptomatic disease is quite surprising and quite effective. The technology for mRNA vaccines, it's been developing for decades at this point, but this is the first time we're having widely distributed vaccines that are using that technology. And with all that consideration, the speed of the trials, the economy the way it was, the fact that our science was able to produce a vaccine that's as effective as it is actually quite the accomplishment. I'd put it akin to developing a polio vaccine or going to the moon. It's one of, when we look back at this in decades to come, it'll be one of the few things that we did right, and it'll be one of the most impressive things we've done in human history, is developing a vaccine this quickly.
And speaking of raising community awareness and effort for vaccination, I know you are going to do a community forum next week for Kairali, Baltimore, no?
That's right. That's right.
And I thought actually they did not try to give this vaccine earlier because they had that issue of this vector probably integrating with the gene. Yeah, that was the main reason. But I think now it is the time to test that, and it looks like working.
Yeah. The initial concern was, do we use like an adenovirus vector? What way can we actually introduce this mRNA into the vaccine? Moderna and Pfizer don't actually need an adenovirus vector at all. They don't actually use that technology.
Okay, it's getting late. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. Thank you so much. Dr. Shyam and Dr. Sunil especially.
Congratulations.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Meeting India അല്ലേ?
നമുക്ക് മീറ്റിംഗ് എൻഡ് ചെയ്തോളൂ. നമുക്ക് സംസാരിക്കാം.
1 minute live സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്തോ.
ലൈവ് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്തോളൂ.